Today we're going to talk about something called executive presence. It's a very elusive term and it's something that's really, really hard to describe, but very, very important in your career. So the best way I like to describe executive presence is that executive presence is your ability to inspire confidence in your leader, your colleagues, your direct reports. For EAs and PAs, this is especially important because you're often asked to lead without a traditional title of authority, and you must rely on your influential leadership skills to make things happen. Also, you are leading up to your executive and then down and out to others throughout the organization. So the best way to think of executive presence is to look at this first slide, where you will see that it's mixture of a few of these things. The first thing is confidence. Confidence is basically one of the biggest descriptors of executive presence. So it's showing that you're confident and you're oozing with confidence, you're very certain in your abilities. And the second thing is charisma. So with charisma, it's mainly about having that gravitas and carrying yourself in a certain way. Sophistication is another way to describe executive presence. So you carry yourself with sophistication and you speak with sophistication. Poise, again, communication, which is really, really vital. When people think of executive presence, they think of communication and the ability to communicate effectively and eloquently. Also reliability. When leaders think of executive presence, they think of, are you reliable? They think of their peers, other leaders, is there someone they can rely on? How reliable are they? The more reliable you are, the more executive presence you have. Another way to describe it is your ability to command a room. So how good are you at commanding a room? Do you have a seat at the table? And finally, another way to describe executive presence is basically how you carry yourself. So how you walk, how you talk, and how you act. So just want you to think for a moment of a leader that you think has really good executive presence. So look at these descriptors: confidence, charisma, sophistication, poise, communication, reliability, and command of a room, and how they carry themselves. So think of a leader, a manager that you've worked with, or one that you're working with now, or even somebody somebody you've come across from another organization. So think for a moment, what kind of traits and characteristics do they display? So just give you a moment to think about that. I mean, often when I think of somebody who oozes with executive presence, who really, really displays a lot of executive presence, I think of Donna Paulson from Suits. You'll see her on the next slide. But I just think the way that she carries herself, the way she talks, in Suits, the way everybody relies on her, her main catchphrase is, I'm Donna and I know everything. So think of an assistant like that. That's a prime example of someone who has a lot of executive presence, and they display a lot of these characters of executive presence. So you may wonder, why is it important to have executive presence? And the way to describe the importance of executive presence is to look at the three spheres of executive presence. So you'll see from my next slide that there are three main elements of executive presence. So the main one is gravitas. This is how you act. It's talking about that charisma, how you pull people, how you charm people. That's a big part of executive presence. So that is actually 67%. The next part is communication, how you speak. That counts for 28% of executive presence. So the way you communicate, or you articulate, the way you display your thoughts. And then you have appearance, which is strange because a lot of people think executive presence is all about appearance, but appearance only counts as only 5% of executive presence. So they're the three main elements of executive presence: the gravitas, how you act; communication, how you speak; and appearance, how you look. So thinking about those those spheres, take a moment to think about yourself. Think, which of those spheres do you have strengths in? Do you have that gravitas, or are you more effective at communicating, and maybe gravitas is an area that you have to work with? So just maybe spend a moment thinking, where your strengths lies. Is it the gravitas, the communication, or do you need to just smarten up your appearance and maybe just look more well groomed? So have a think about that. Another way to think of executive presence is to think, how do people remember you, or how do they experience you? So maybe think about the last meeting that you had. I know at the moment they've all been online, or the last networking event that you've been to. When you leave the room, do you leave an aura behind? Do you leave some energy behind? Or also when you're at a networking event, you've exchanged business cards, you've made lots of connections. At the end of the day, would people still remember you? Would they remember, oh, that's Sarah that I met earlier on? Are you memorable? Do you have an impact? So these are ways to think, if you have that executive presence and if you display that. So have a brief moment to think, the last meeting you had, like I said, the last networking event, have you been memorable? Have you made an impact? And how you could make an impact in the future. So it's a few things to be mindful of. Next question is, why is executive presence important? So we're clear on what it is. It's how you act, how you speak, how you look. It's displaying all those characteristics. But why is it important to have executive presence? I would say the biggest benefit of having executive presence is the opportunities that come your way, and also the involvement in projects that you have. So with executive presence, I feel that once you display it, once you instill that confidence in others, you add wider organizational value. And the reason you add wider organizational value is because you inspire confidence in others. You basically show them that you know what you're talking about, you can do the job, you've got this. Another reason for why we need to have executive presence is for leadership and for promotion. Time and time again, I come across team leaders, managers, executives that say, I have someone who's brilliant at their role, amazing at their job, their technical skills are on point, but they just lack a certain something. And again, like I said, it's really hard to describe that something, but what they mean is that executive presence. So the person may look really good on paper, they may do the tasks and the role that they're assigned to very well, but they're not really able to influence others or have an impact on others and lead others because they don't display these characteristics of executive presence. So it's something that's really, really important if you want to move to a leadership role, and also for promotion purposes, because to be promoted and to move through your organization, you won't get very far without displaying characteristics of executive presence. Another reason why you need executive presence is for decision-making processes. The more you're involved with decisions, the more impact you will have. So it's really, really important that people look to you for your advice, for your contribution, and for your decision-making abilities. And you can only display executive presence by being able to convince others and persuade others that you are good at making decisions. So essentially gives you a seat at the table. So just to run through that again, you need executive presence for more opportunities, to add organizational value, to inspire confidence in others, for leadership and promotion, and for decision-making ability, and to have a seat at the table. So you may wonder, how do you cultivate executive presence? So we know what it is, we know why we need it, but how do we actually cultivate executive presence? How do we build executive presence? Because it's not something that you're born with, and most people who have executive presence, they've actually worked quite hard, and they've been quite mindful and purposeful and deliberate in building executive presence. So one of the ways to build executive presence is to display your confidence, like we mentioned earlier. And the best way to be confident is to take action. Once you take action, you'll realize that you can, you've got this, you could do this, and you'll come across any hurdles or any teething problems. So by taking action, you'll realize you could do something. And then once you realize you have that certainty you can do something, that usually leads and motivates you to do that again and do that repeatedly. So taking action gives you that motivation and it adds to your confidence. Stepping out of your comfort zone, that's another way to display executive presence. Again, when you try something new, when you've stepped out of your comfort zone, how many times have you thought, oh, that actually wasn't too bad, or I wasn't sure about that, wasn't sure if I can manage that, or if I could work on that, whether I had the skills for that. But then you think, oh no, I actually did quite a good job. So basically, it's really important that you do step out of your comfort zone, because that again will build your confidence. Another way to cultivate executive presence is to be really watchful of your body language. So we're talking about, good eye contact, especially online at the moment. A lot of meetings, a lot of communication is done online, and it's even more important to make sure that you display good eye contact, you have a good posture, you sit upright, you're not folding your arms, you give the nod to show you're listening, and you also give space to the audience for them to ask questions, and share any thoughts that they may have. Another way that you can cultivate executive presence is effective communication. So use your voice more. Again, when we're working online, because of the lockdown, you need to almost speak louder when you're presenting or when you're in a meeting. So speak louder than you would normally speak, because it's the way it's been proven. There's loads of studies to show that it's more impactful. And also just make sure that you do share your thoughts and you have that voice and you're not hesitant, because when you physically, people can't see you and they're not sure, you're not visible in front of them. It's really, really important to take those opportunities when you are visible in meetings, networking events, team drinks online, to make sure that you use your voice. Another way to cultivate executive presence is to connect with others. Now, this is a big one. Connecting with others is really, really important, because that allows you to build rapport with someone. And the more rapport you build with someone, the more they get to like you and know you and trust you. And once you build that rapport and once somebody trusts you, then you're more likely to be able to influence them or persuade them and just generally have more impact. And the best way to build rapport with someone is to really listen to them, maybe find out what their interests are. Again, look at their body language, non-verbal cues as well. If you're talking about something and they're not really listening and their eyes are wandering, then that's an indication for you to change the subject or talk about something that they may be interested in. If it's somebody you're speaking to, an executive, and they like golf, maybe talk about golf. So it's less about what you say, but more about listening and more about gauging how you can connect with them. I mean, the best way I can explain connecting with someone is having a 15-year-old or a 20-year-old come and sit next to you, and you being able to strike a conversation with them and engage with them. And then in the next half an hour, meeting a 70-year-old, you should still have something to talk about with them, whether it's food, cultures, some current events. There should be some point of connection. Maybe if you're speaking to somebody who has children, you could speak about your children, or you could speak about your nephews and nieces. Like I said, it could be about cooking, it could be about anything, but having that connection with other people through listening and through reading their body language, and making sure that what you speak about and what you talk about is actually something that they are interested in. Another way to cultivate executive presence is by having a can-do attitude, an I will figure it out attitude. Again, if you think of Donna Paulson from Suits, how many times does she think, right, leave it to me, I'll figure this out? And that's the kind of attitude you need to have. And again, that comes together with stepping out of your comfort zone, trying things for the first time. So having that that optimistic, positive attitude, and almost talking yourself up, even when you're unsure how you're going to get something done, but you know that you will give it your best shot and you will get this done. Linked to the confidence and the can-do attitude is self-belief. So cultivating executive presence comes from that self-belief, from that gut feeling, from that belief in yourself. Self-belief is that certainty in your abilities, that confidence in your abilities, that you add value, you have something to contribute to. So make sure you work on your self-worth, on your self-confidence, because when you are sure and you believe in your mind that you could do something, then physically you're much more likely to succeed, because you just have that belief and that optimism that you could do something. Another way to cultivate executive presence, which you could do instantly, is to prepare for meetings. Like I said, at the moment, most meetings are online, but give yourself 5 or 10 minutes to prepare for a meeting. Rather than having back-to-back meetings all day, think before you enter a meeting, what's the agenda of the meeting? I know meeting organizers are not always great at talking about what the agenda is, but really for someone to effectively organize a meeting, it should be very clear what you're going to discuss in the meeting, what the topics are, what the projects are. So it's really important to even ask somebody what the agenda is, and then spend 5 or 10 minutes looking to see, do you have something you can contribute? Do you have any ideas that you can share? Do you have any questions? Once you think about these things before a meeting, you're more likely to speak in a meeting, to contribute, and to put your hand up, because you're prepared. Also, you may have something to share on the topic, something you've read, in an article or on the news. So try and prepare for meetings, because the more you prepare, the more confident you will be in meetings, and the more you will display to others that you have this executive presence, and that you have this confidence, and you have this gravitas that we have been talking about. Networking is a big way to build executive presence. So imagine you're networking in a room, whether it's a Zoom room or in person. If you're not really cultivating your connections and making connections, you're not really speaking and building rapport with others, then you're less likely to have that impact and less likely to leave an impression on someone. So networking is very, very important for you to think, right, I have 1 hour here networking, and I need to make the biggest impression, most positive impression I can make of myself, my organization, my team, because as executive assistants and personal assistants, you are the face of the organization and you are a partner to your executive. So it's really important that you are relaying your organization's values and ethos when you are networking and meeting others around you. Again, it's all about being memorable at the end of an evening, or being memorable at the end of an event, because as you know, with networking, we meet so many people that it's only someone that catches our eye or someone that left an impression that we're more likely to engage in, again, more likely to know, more likely to trust and do business with, or offer opportunities to. Grace under pressure is another way to build executive presence. You may see with your executives how stressful and how demanding their roles are. Your roles can be very demanding and very stressful, but it's all about being calm under pressure and managing your emotions. So this leads me to emotional intelligence, which again is another buzzword that's been thrown around over the last decade. But with emotional intelligence, it's that ability of managing yourself and your thoughts and emotions and managing others. So I'm sure as assistants, you've managed your executives and your peers maybe, and managed others in your team, but it's keeping calm under pressure and displaying that emotional intelligence, because along with executive presence, emotional intelligence is closely linked. You can't usually have one without the other. So it's really important to display that emotional intelligence when you are displaying that you have executive presence. And an easy way at the moment, especially during lockdown and while we are working from home, one other tip I have for displaying executive presence is use one social media platform. So whether it's LinkedIn or whether it's Twitter, depending on your organization, have a voice, contribute and share something, write something, be visible on one social media platform. And the idea for this is when you're out of sight, you're out of mind. But if you're online on a platform, you're there in front of people's minds. So when someone thinks of you, or they think of an opportunity, or there's a promotion happening, or somebody's looking to recruit someone, or somebody's looking for someone to do something, you'll spring to their mind, especially if they've just seen you this morning on Twitter or they've seen you on LinkedIn. So make sure that you're active on one social media platform. And the idea behind this is to show that you are an industry expert, that you're an expert in your field, because working hard will not just give you your credibility, will not provide you opportunities, will not always get you promoted. How many people do you know where they're working hard but they're not working smart? And working smart is paying attention to these things such as executive presence and making sure that you build on those.